The air was thin and freezing. Below, the city of Bogota glittered like a carpet of scattered jewels, a world away from the suffocating darkness of the landing gear compartment. For a 13-year-old boy named Juan Carlos Guzman Betancourt, this was the only way out. He had tucked himself into the cramped, unpressurized space of a cargo plane's wheel well, a desperate gamble against impossible odds. He was leaving behind a life of poverty, a childhood spent on the unforgiving streets of Cali, Colombia. His dreams were simple: to reach the sun-drenched shores of Miami and find a new life. He had nothing but the clothes on his back and a fierce, burning desire to escape the fate that seemed pre-written for him. The roar of the engines was deafening, a monstrous sound that promised either salvation or a silent, icy tomb. His journey was a testament to human endurance, a 3-hour ordeal that defied medical science. As the plane ascended to 35,000 feet, the temperature plummeted to a lethal -40 degrees Celsius. The oxygen thinned to almost nothing. Most stowaways perish in such conditions, their bodies succumbing to hypoxia and extreme cold. But Juan Carlos, through an extraordinary twist of fate, or sheer force of will, survived. He drifted into a state of suspended animation, his body shutting down to conserve what little warmth and oxygen it had. When the plane began its descent into Miami International Airport, the gradual warming of the air and the return of breathable oxygen slowly roused him from his near-fatal slumber. He was a ghost, returning to the world of the living. Upon landing, a ground crew member was performing routine checks when he saw something fall from the wheel well. It was a small, frozen figure. He rushed over, expecting the worst, only to find the boy stirring, dazed and disoriented, but miraculously alive. Juan Carlos had done it. He had crossed the sky, a silent passenger in the belly of a metal beast, and arrived in the land of his dreams. His story immediately became a sensation. Here was a boy who had risked everything, who had stared death in the face and won, all for a chance at a better life. The media dubbed him the Stowaway Kid, a symbol of hope and desperation that captured the heart of a nation. The tale he told was heartbreaking. He spoke of a family lost, of being an orphan forced to fend for himself on the streets. He claimed his name was Guillermo Rosales, a fiction created out of necessity. He was a blank slate, a young boy with a harrowing past and an uncertain future, now thrust into the bright, confusing lights of America. His survival was deemed a 1-in-a-million miracle. The world saw a resilient child, a survivor who embodied the immigrant dream. But behind the innocent eyes and the compelling story, a different truth was waiting, one far more complex and cunning than anyone could have imagined. The city of Miami embraced the boy they knew as Guillermo Rosales. His story resonated deeply. It was a narrative of courage against overwhelming odds, a modern-day fairy tale with a real-life hero. As sympathy poured in from all corners, people wanted to help this remarkable child who had cheated death for a shot at the American dream. He was temporarily placed in a youth shelter, but his tale had reached the ears of a kind-hearted Miami-Dade police officer named Richard Bango. Moved by the boy's apparent plight and incredible journey, Bango and his wife, a schoolteacher, opened their home to him. For a fleeting moment, Juan Carlos had found the stability and affection he had never known. Life with the Bango family was a world away from the streets of Cali. He had his own room, warm meals, and people who cared for his well-being. He was enrolled in school and began learning English, adapting with a speed that impressed everyone. Richard Bango became a father figure, teaching him to ride a bike and play baseball, experiences that were entirely new to the boy.
He seemed to be a model child, polite and grateful for the kindness he was shown. Thank you.
The community rallied around him, donating clothes, toys, and money to help him build his new life. It appeared as though the stowaway's impossible gamble had paid off in the most spectacular way, delivering him from a life of destitution into the heart of a loving family. Juan Carlos played the part of the grateful orphan perfectly. He was charming and intelligent, quickly winning over not just the Bangos, but their entire neighborhood. To them, he was a living miracle, a boy who represented the very best of the human spirit. He was featured in newspapers and on television, his face becoming synonymous with resilience. He told reporters about his dreams of becoming a pilot, a poignant ambition for a boy who had arrived in the country by clinging to the outside of an airplane. The public was captivated. Here was a story with a happy ending, a bright light in a world often filled with darkness. The Bangos were lauded for their generosity, and Guillermo was celebrated as a symbol of hope. But even in this idyllic setting, small inconsistencies began to surface. He seemed older than the 13 years he claimed. His knowledge of the world, and of its darker corners, was sometimes unnerving for a child. There were moments when a fleeting hardness would cross his face, a shadow of a life lived far from the innocence of childhood. The fairy tale began to unravel just a few weeks after it began. While the public celebrated the story of Guillermo Rosales, immigration authorities were quietly working behind the scenes. They were tasked with verifying the boy's identity, a standard procedure for any undocumented arrival. They ran his fingerprints through international databases, a routine check that would change everything. The results that came back were shocking. The boy was not Guillermo Rosales. The 13-year-old orphan claim collapsed. His name was Juan Carlos Guzman Betancourt. He was 17 years old. The innocent child who had captured Miami's heart had a past, and it was not the one he had so convincingly described. The revelations did not stop there. Far from being an orphan, Juan Carlos had a mother in Colombia. Authorities contacted her. She confirmed his identity and his real age. The database also revealed he had a juvenile criminal record for minor thefts and scams. The image of the desperate, innocent boy who had stowed away for a better life was shattered. In his place was a troubled teenager, a petty criminal who had used a breathtakingly dangerous stunt to enter the United States under false pretenses. The entire narrative, so eagerly consumed by the media and the public, was built on a foundation of lies. The Bangos were devastated. They had opened their hearts and their home to a boy they believed needed protection. The discovery of his deception was a profound betrayal. Richard Bango, a police officer sworn to uphold the law, had been personally conned. He faced the reality that the boy he had treated like a son was a calculating manipulator. Public sympathy curdled into suspicion and anger. The hero they had celebrated was a fraud. The media turned on him, dissecting his lies and painting him as a cunning delinquent. Faced with undeniable proof, Juan Carlos was stripped of his fabricated identity. The dream was over. He was no longer the miraculous stowaway kid, but a cautionary tale of deception. Due to his age and fraudulent entry, the decision was made to deport him. In September 1993, a few months after his arrival, Juan Carlos was put on a plane and sent back to Colombia. Deportation back to Colombia was not a deterrent for Juan Carlos. Honestly, it was more like an education. He had tasted a different world, a world of comfort and opportunity. And yeah, he was determined to get it back. The experience in Miami had taught him a powerful lesson. A convincing story, delivered with charm, was a key that could unlock doors. He had fooled the public, the media, even a police officer. His mistake, he reasoned, wasn't the lie itself, but that he had allowed himself to be caught. He would not make that mistake again. His focus shifted from seeking sympathy to seizing opportunity, and he began honing the skills that would make him an international phantom. He didn't stay in Colombia for long. The life he had fled still held no appeal. His ambition was now global. He began a relentless campaign to re-enter the developed world, using a variety of methods and identities. He attempted to cross borders illegally, sometimes succeeding for short periods before being caught and deported again. He was sent back from the United States multiple times. But with each failure, he grew smarter and more sophisticated. He learned the art of creating false documents, of studying identities and adopting them as his own. He was no longer a desperate boy. He was becoming a student of deception, a chameleon learning to blend into any environment. His travels took him to Europe, a new and promising theater of operations. He slipped into the United Kingdom, a place where his Colombian origins could be more easily obscured. Here, he began to develop the persona that would define his criminal career. He observed the wealthy, studying their mannerisms, their speech, their sense of entitlement. He learned that in the exclusive world of luxury hotels and high society, confidence was currency. If you looked and acted like you belonged, no one would question your presence. He shed the last remnants of the poor boy from Cali and adopted the guise of a sophisticated, well-to-do traveler. This transformation was the true birth of his criminal enterprise. Juan Carlos's method was a masterclass in social engineering, elegant in its simplicity and honestly devastatingly effective. He would never check into a hotel as a guest. Instead, he would walk in through the front door dressed impeccably in a designer suit, looking every bit the part of a wealthy businessman who had just stepped out for a meeting. He moved with an air of relaxed authority, greeting the staff with a confident nod. His first target was not a guest room, but the hotel's business center. There, he would use a computer to look up the names of registered guests, often targeting those with suites, wedding parties, corporate delegations. He was a predator studying his prey. Once he had a name, his operation began. He would find a house phone and call the front desk, impersonating the guest he had just identified. He would claim, with a tone of mild annoyance, that his electronic keycard had stopped working. The front desk staff, trained to provide seamless service, would almost invariably apologize and issue a new key without asking for identification. They had no reason to be suspicious. The call was coming from inside the hotel, and the person on the line sounded exactly like the kind of person who belonged there. With the new key in hand, Juan Carlos had unfettered access to the guest's room and all their belongings. Inside the room, he worked quickly and methodically. He was not interested in large items. He sought out what law enforcement would later call the 3 C's: cash, credit cards, and jewelry.